Welcome to Pioneer Mindset, a place where we challenge our mindset and address the discomfort in both business and life by finding clarity resulting in bold conviction. I'm your host, Garrett Ruskamp, fifth generation farmer, husband, and father from rural Nebraska. Whether you're navigating frustration from past decisions or worry about the uncertainty you face today in your business, we're going to learn from our struggles and take on new challenges with a resilient mindset. Join me as I share my journey of struggles I faced in agriculture as a farmer and family man. I'm ready to dive into honest conversations to tackle the mindsets surrounding key issues that rural ag business owners face that will ultimately help you gain control, leading to a profitable and sustainable business. Let's adapt to Pioneer Mindset and get to it. Welcome back, everyone, to this week's episode of Pioneer Mindset. So I heard a phrase a while back, and it was basically goes like this. The farm will take every minute you have and every dollar that you own. Not about you, but that phrase just really kind of hit true to me. All right. And so I want to kind of build upon last week's episode of the weight of the workload. Kind of mentioned a 3-part series here, as we're going to be talking about the current kind of stressors that most people are facing within their own operation. All right, so last week we talked about the weight of the workload and literally just getting everything done. And now this week, what I want to talk about is not letting the business side of your farming operation fall apart. Okay. And so today we're going to really just talk about, what quietly happens to your business when you're only focused on the fields. All right, when you're only focused at doing things that are at hand within the busy season. All right, so back to the weight of the workload. When everything takes your mind, just trying to get all your tasks accomplished, trying to get the crop planted, kind of trying to get it sprayed, trying to make sure you're taking care of the cattle. We're going to get into hay in season pretty soon here. So all of those things that we need to do, everything that needs to get done from the time you wake up to the time that you lay your head down at night, all of those things take up your mental energy, your time, and your resources, right? And so we want to just make sure that we're not forgetting about the business side of things that just get forgotten about, left behind, and even completely dropped sometimes. And so when it comes to the business side, it's one of those things that's really easy for us to put off, really easy to put on the back burner, to really not even focus at all for an extended amount of time. So with that, I want to talk about, okay, what happens? What does this actually look like? And so last week, at the time of this recording, we just really started getting the planter out into the field and got a couple beans put into the ground. And so we really got into that super, super busy season where there's so much to do on the week. And when you're getting into the go season, especially a season like planting, when everybody else is going and you're using that as your gauge as to whether you should be going or not, okay, so last week was really probably the busiest work weeks in the field for planting that we had in our area. So almost everybody was out there getting something done. And so with that, if somebody else is getting something done, if somebody else is rolling, you feel like you need to be rolling too. There's almost that bit of peer pressure that comes upon us, but also just the urgency of if they are going, we need also to be going so that way we can kind of get some things done, right? And so with that, it's pretty easy for us to kind of forget about everything. So a really prime example of it last week was in the field and we were planting and I got a text from a marketing advisor and we're trying to figure out, hey, should we make some more moves? Should we move that percentage sold for this year's crop a little bit further, or what should we do here? And then he was texting me back some different options. It might have been even just easier to talk through it on the phone, but texting back some different choices that we can make on actually options, futures options, hedging, all that other fun stuff, right? And so I'm trying to look at this while trying to plant, while trying to pay attention to the monitor, while trying to make sure nothing's broke down on the planter, while trying to make sure that we get the seed in the ground properly and do this, that, or the other thing, taking calls from dad, taking calls from this person, and just trying to do everything that we have to do. And it's pretty easy for us to get overwhelmed and get fatigued in that time frame of making these decisions. So at the time, I was like, man, should really just not even worry about this. You should just put this, just not do it. I've got to focus on this. I got to focus on getting the beans in the ground. I got to focus on making sure the planter doesn't run out of seed or just doing this, that, or the other thing. All right. So that might be one quick example, but the reality is it's pretty easy for maybe an invoice to get left behind or maybe not get paid on time, or maybe we miss out on that early discount period because we didn't get it paid on time, or if it was shuffled in that stack of bills that we didn't look at for the past week because, hey, we were doing other things, right? Or maybe we didn't invoice things out in time. Maybe we did some custom work for somebody and we haven't get those invoices sent out in time because, well, hey, that's not important right now, right? Or maybe we missed the meeting with the accountant or with the banker or missed that marketing opportunity like I just mentioned, right? So all of these things play out and they can add up. They could be really costly for the business. but then they could just be really a mental fatigue on us as well as owners of the business, as business owners, right? We got to make these decisions as we go. And so it can be really hard to kind of stay on top of these things. And it's pretty easy, like I said, back to the busy season when we got so much else going on, it's pretty easy to let things fall kind of through the cracks or let things slide and let almost the business of farming, the farm business, almost fall apart to some extent. And so that is one of the, when we kind of talk about this two-part series, this second part of this series here, is this is one of the things that really kind of comes to mind for me and really stresses me out when it comes to the busy season. And the season that we're currently in, by the way, is just making sure that this does not fall behind. We pride ourselves, at least I do anyways, pride ourselves on being good farmers, good business owners, good decision makers, entrepreneurs, whatever you want to classify yourself as, at being the best job that we can be. And so this is one of those areas, back to the workload. We want to get things done, but we also want to make sure that this part does not slide as well. We want to do all things perfectly and be perfect. Yes, I know that's what we want to do, right? But that's not always the case. There's a lot of things that kind of come up for me and probably for you too when it comes to the business side of things. And it's just one of those areas that's really easy to let us slip behind, fall through the cracks, and not think about it, not worry about it. Okay. But this, at the end of the day, we got to also ask ourselves, is that ultimately going to get us to where we want to go? And so with that, just want to kind of focus on a few things here. This might seem kind of small. Maybe it's the small things that start slipping through the cracks first. All right. So focusing on the small things. Okay. It's really easy to put those things off. It's really easy to not worry about them. Literally, like I said, maybe it's even getting the mail. All right. Maybe that's somebody else's job, or maybe it's your wife's job. Maybe it's something that you haven't done the last couple of days, even though you've driven by the mailbox 5 times. I just forgot to get it. Or maybe we got the mail, we just put it on the counter, put it in that corner of the office, and we didn't look at it. Or we saw the bill, we didn't pay much attention to it. Hey, we in the back of our mind, we got 30 days till that thing's paid for. It needs to be paid, right? Well, what about opening that thing up to see if there's an early pay discount? I know, particular for one of our different suppliers or vendors that we work with for fuel specifically, they always have early pay discount. If you pay by such a date of the month, you get that early pay discount. And so there's a lot of times that quite frankly, we've missed those because we haven't got that mail opened up in time, because we've been so busy doing other things, or because we saw it and we thought we had 30 days and we forgot about it. Okay. And furthermore, maybe it's to where you didn't even get it paid in 30 days. And now we got interest tacked onto that. And now we got, even bigger bill than what we could have had if we'd have paid that on time. All right. So it might be the small things that we put off and we do right away, or we forget to do. And it's one of those things where it's just so easy to put those off. Well, got to make sure we get the seed in the ground. Everybody else is going. We got to go too. Don't worry about this, that, or the other thing. We will take care of that another day. We will take care of it another day. We'll take care of it another day. And that goes on and on until we say, well, we'll catch up on a rainy day, or we'll catch up when we have time. And let's just be honest, those things don't come as often or as quick as they probably should. Side note, by the way, I got to throw this in here. I'm recording this on a Monday right after a rain event. Okay. So this is one of those things where this is that side of the business that I was able to do. I was able to sit down and record this podcast, kind of think about what I was going to talk about. I was only able to do this because it actually rained. Otherwise, this is another area of the business that is pretty easy for us to put off. Right. And so we think about the financial side of things, maybe paying bills, sending out invoices, meetings, and all those different things, and even the marketing. We'll get into that here in a second. But what about the things that just need to be done on a consistent basis? For example, like me recording this podcast. Yeah, it's pretty easy to put this thing off until another day when the sun's shining and we got to make hay, right? I always heard that phrase, got to make hay while the sun shines. My dad reminds me of that all the time. And that is very true. But at the end of the day, if we've got, a month of sunny days in a row, when are we ever going to do the rainy day stuff? When are we ever going to sit down and take care of that stuff? Even though that's just as important as making sure we get the hay baled, right? Making sure we get everything else taken care of outside, or getting seed in the ground, or make sure we do all those other things on our to-do list that are, quite frankly, probably more fun. Okay. Probably more fun and probably something that we'd rather do and probably have a lot more urgency to them to some extent, right? We'll get into that here in a second too. But anyways, kind of back to the little things are usually the easiest ones to kind of put off in the beginning. Got the mail, I'll stick it there and I'll look at it another day. And so it's those little things that are really easy to kind of start putting off. But there's other things that kind of amount to this as well too. When it comes to not letting the business side of farming actually fall apart, the one area that I also want to go to that comes top of mind for me It's just all of the decisions that need to be made in the midst of the busy season. In the midst of, back to that marketing example, like I talked about before, markets don't stop when the sun's shining and we're out planting, boys and girls. All right. The markets don't stop. All the government doesn't stop. All the different programs that might be coming out don't stop. So all those things never stop. And so there's things that we still need to be paying attention to on a consistent basis. So the marketing is one of those. I'm pretty good about letting our marketing advisor actually take care of a lot of that stuff. Really, I think that's a good benefit to working with a market advisor because they are your eyes and ears when you don't have time to be, and they're watching things when you maybe are not. And so this is a really prime example of having somebody else in place that can do that. Okay. So not gonna go down that rabbit hole too much, but just in general, maybe even if you don't have a marketing advisor, okay, you know how easy it is. So that way, if we're literally out in the field planting from sun up to sundown or just out doing things, yeah, we might hear the markets on the radio. We might think in the back of our head, we should do something. Corn's up 5 or 6 today. We should do something. And then what happens? Well, the alarm just went off. We're out of seed. Shoot, we just ran out of fertilizer. Oh man, I got to fix a gauge wheel on the planter, or this, that, or the other thing comes up, and all of a sudden it never happens. Okay. It never happens today. We missed the marketing opportunity. Corn's down 10 today. And stuff like that happens. I understand that. But at the end of the day, we got to ask ourselves once again, what is this costing us by not focusing on this? Okay. The marketing is one of those things that it comes down to even an emotional decision as well. And I can attest to this back to the statement I just made. I was literally just focused on what was right in front of me, getting the crop planted, that I did not even want to take the time to make the decision, let alone remove the emotions from the decision. When I say remove the emotions, it might simply just be taking the time because I'm tired. I don't have time. I don't want to focus on this. I've got better things to do. Got to make hay while the sun shines, right? So we focus on that and not these other things. And so now this becomes an emotional decision when it should be unemotional, right? It should be a business decision. All right, corn was up today. We got a chance to make a move on a percent sold. We got a good opportunity here with the market where it's at. Maybe basis improved, all these other things. It should be unemotional. But because we got everything else going on, because we're immersed in the busy season, because we are so wrapped up in everything else that we're doing, it becomes emotional. It becomes, I don't want to do this today. Or I don't feel like making this decision today. We'll make it tomorrow. Or I don't feel like paying these bills today. We'll pay those tomorrow. And all these other things that kind of come around with that, right? So, prime example there on the marketing side, I can go on and on about that. But the next one here that specifically I was thinking about as well is our crop plans. Okay, so our crop plans is another one of those that hopefully we've done our due diligence in the off season or kind of prior to the busy season to where we've made our crop plans. Okay, this is what our in-furrow starter fertilizer is going to be. This is the seeds that we're going to plant. This is what our herbicide program looks like. This is when we're going to spray, try to spray at this time, rates that we're going to use, all this other stuff, yada, yada. For most of us, we probably have that plan somewhat laid out, right? But in the midst of the busy season, in the midst of the growing season, even, it's pretty easy for us to adjust those plans. I'll give you a prime example here. So this year on our farm, we were going to variable rate our soybean seeding population. And initially at the beginning of the season, I'm like, all right, I want to dial back my soybean population a little bit, try to save a little bit on seed. Maybe we can, back that off a little bit, but then we're going to variable rate as well. So maybe we're shooting for an average population of 120, you know what I mean? And something like that. And so we're going to back off a little bit. And the first field that we planted, we had a prescription in there, and the prescription was working, by the way, and we got it inputted in there. And there was a thought that I had, but the prescription was actually higher than what I was thinking that it was because, well, let's be honest here. I didn't take the time to look at the plan ahead of actually going to the field like I maybe should have. And so now we're here. Okay. We are in the field. We need to plant. I don't care if I'm planting the prescription. I don't care if I'm planting a variable or a flat rate. We need to go. All right. And so with this, we did our best to try to figure out a way to adjust it, but for some reason we couldn't. All right. So it was a little bit higher. It was probably close to that 130, 135 population on soybeans. So I'm talking 15,000 higher than what my initial plan was. And so that's to where that could, that changes just in the midst of a growing season. All right. Now, those little things may not add up a lot, but they do add up. All right. The pennies make dimes, dimes make dollars. Right. And so that's kind of a prime example there. And so in the back of my head, I'm like, well, shoot, maybe this is higher. I'll just flat rate it. I'll just, switch it from variable rate to manual. I'll just flat rate everything. Well, I'm like, well, that's really not what I want to do either. And so that's just a really prime example there that in the midst of a growing season, because we get so caught up and focused on one, the workload, and two, making progress, and three, just got to keep moving, and four, I don't care. We just got to go. You know what I mean? And so it gets pretty easy for us to make all those emotional decisions. Kind of another one there on that same regard is staying true to that cost of production, that plan that we put together, right? At this pass, I'm going to put down 30 pounds of nitrogen and no more. Well, shoot, if 30 pounds is good, the marketing guy next door says that, or the agronomist says, well, hey, you're looking a little bit short here. Maybe we should put a little bit extra on. Or maybe back to the seed example, maybe the seed guy says, well, I've got this trial here. We could throw this thing in here and it's going to get you an extra 4 bushels, 5 bushels an acre. We should do this. Okay, let's do it. And it's all those little things that we're like, oh, all right, let's do it. And it also kind of goes back, by the way, side comment here, it also kind of goes back to our mindset and how we're taught, trained, and conditioned. And for us as farmers, for row crop farmers especially, and it could be the same for livestock, people talking about pounds on the livestock, same thing for row crops. Yield, yield, yield. All right, if I can get an extra 5 bushels per acre, yeah, why not? Why not do that? Because yield is, money in the bank, right? So we always think that in the back of our heads, even though we've already come up with the cost of production, we've already come up with the plan so we can know exactly what our break evens are and know where our marketing plan sits accordingly. But when all of a sudden we throw these little caveats in here, well, let's try this product, let's try that product, let's do this, that, or the other thing, and it starts to change that picture a little bit. And that's the part where I get caught up a little bit because we get almost into maybe a little bit of a scarcity mindset. I get that way when it comes to back to like the herbicide plans. Right. So I'd like to think that, okay, maybe we can back this down a little bit. Maybe instead of using 16 ounces, let's go down to 8 ounces. Or instead of 30 ounces of Roundup, let's back down to 22, 24 ounces. And yeah, those don't save a lot, but at the end of the day, they are kind of important to the overall plan here. But then when I'm like, oh, shoot, well, this field's got a little bit higher weed pressure. I don't want those weeds to escape from me. I don't want this, that, or the other thing. I'm not going to worry about it. Oh, if in doubt, just put it in. If in doubt, just do it. If in doubt, raise the rate if we have to. You know what I mean? If in doubt, we just make all these kind of emotional decisions, caught up in the moment, caught up in the busyness of the season, right? And so those are another thing that really at the end of the day kind of stresses me. Okay, can I stay true to the plan that we've created? Can I stay true to everything we've talked about thus far? And kind of the last example here when it comes to the emotional decision would be like on equipment repairs and just decisions right there. I'm always one of those like, well, if this broke down, let's just get 5 extra to have on hand just in case. You know what I mean? Or that just in case. It literally goes back to the productivity side of things. Well, this is broke down right now. Just call up the phone, call up Mother Dale. Let's get this thing fixed now. All right. And, do we need this part tomorrow or the next day, or do we need it, now? We need it now. You know what I mean? It's all those little things that add up to emotional decisions, that add up to decisions that we make just kind of on a whim, right? And not necessarily even thinking through them from a business owner standpoint. We're thinking through them from a purely emotional standpoint. By the way, I'm not saying these are all bad decisions. I'm not saying that you're a bad guy because you put this part on priority instead of flat rate, you know what I mean? And stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we got to ask ourselves, is this helping us stay true to where we're trying to go? And so the question comes about is, why does all this matter? Why does it matter if we skip our paying our bills for a while, or if we skip opening the mail to see what's kind of relevant here, what needs to be paid here recently? Why does it matter if we don't market today versus tomorrow, or we don't stay true to our crop plan? Why does all of this matter if we are focused on the crop? We're just doing what farmers do. We're just trying to do the best job that we can to raise a good crop, raise a good product, whether it be the crops or the livestock. We're just doing the best job that we can to be good farmers. Well, what's the matter if we don't necessarily focus on the business side for a month or 2 or 3 or 5? I don't know. What does it matter? So this phrase really kind of hit home for me, but it's in the midst of the growing season or calving season, you wouldn't go a month without checking on the cows or the crops. So then why would you do the same with your business? Why would you do the same and just completely neglect your business? So now back to the same example. If you stop paying attention to the crops or the cows, they could die. That's true. They could die. If you stop paying attention to your business, it could die also. All right. Now, this seems extreme. This seems like geez, why is this guy taking me down this route? He's making me feel like crap because I haven't paid attention to my business for a while. No, that's not the whole point of this. The whole point of this is just to realize how important some of these things are. All right. It kind of goes back to that whole chicken or egg situation. right? Okay, what came first, the chicken or the egg? All right, back to the same side of the business. All right, if we focus solely on the business and we never take care of feeding the cows, taking care of the crops, we're not going to have anything that's going to keep us in business. But if it's on the flip side of that, if we only focus on the crops and the cows and we don't pay attention to the business or paying the bills or anything that are actually making us money, we're not going to be in business for very long. Kind of goes back to the phrase that those wonderful guys at Farm for Profit podcast use all the time. If you're not farming for profit, you're not going to be farming for long. Well, I can tell you what, if you don't even know where your profit is, if you don't even know if the decisions you're making are helping you get closer to a profit, how are you going to even stay in business? All right. I just bring this up because I like to highlight the importance of what we're talking about and why this is something that we should maybe shift our mindset on. I'm not trying to overhaul everything that you're doing. I'm not trying to take you out of the tractor on a nice sunshiny day when tomorrow is supposed to rain. No, this is all within reason. And by the way, I'm still a farmer, folks. I'm still one of those guys that is trying to maximize every good day that we have. But I'm also trying to find a balance here. I'm also trying to find that dichotomy almost, if you will, just trying to find that, hey, we got to spend some time here today and there tomorrow. Okay. And so truly asking ourselves, what's going to make the difference? Okay. What's going to make the difference for you and your ability to make better decisions within the moment, within the busy season, within that moment when you just want to do nothing else but just focus on planting or spraying or not the business, right? And so, what's going to make the difference? I think truly, and this is where we're getting into some of those action item steps that you can really take home and do something about. I think truly it's going to be the mindset and the awareness. So, your ability to be able to pause, detach, and not make an emotional decision. That's truly what's going to set you apart from those around you. That's truly what's going to help you maybe not get caught up so much in the here and now and the go, go, go factor, and maybe help us to fully just do the best job that we can as business owners, all right, as farmers, as entrepreneurs, right? Yes, we want to do a good job taking care of the crops and livestock, but we also want to do a good job taking care of the business so that way they can work in harmony as one, not separately, but as one. See those as working together. And that if I can maybe take some time today, take a few minutes in the office this morning before we get out and about and really ground myself in what I'm trying to do, realizing that that is ultimately going to allow me to stay in business, to allow me to continue to do what I love and enjoy, which is, taking care of the crops and livestock. So it's kind of that mindset shift and that ability to pause, detach, and not make that quick emotional decision. And I think the other thing I want to highlight there is the word quick, because I've been there, done that too, is we've got to make the decision. I just want this decision done and over with. What's the quick and easiest decision? And then we make it, boom, done. So I can get outside or get back to what I'm doing. That's the hardest part is I find myself very rushed in everything that we're doing, trying to get through everything that's on my to-do list, trying to get through knowing I got to make this decision, but just so I can get out and I can plant just like my neighbor's doing. You know what I mean? So having the ability to take that pause. And so we're not making that quick emotional decision. Okay. So what can we do? What can we honestly do about this? Because we're probably all guilty of this and I am as well. So what can we do to kind of, hey, let's learn from this? And I talked about just before what's going to make the difference is the mindset, but then the awareness. So even just the awareness to know how do you operate now? Do you get it worked up and excited when you see your neighbor's tractor driving down the road and you're not? Or when you see a sprayer going through the field already at 8 o'clock in the morning and you're not, and you're trying to focus on this other stuff. Just being aware of how you operate. And then from that, let's just kind of work through it as best as we can. Okay. So let's start by one, just building a plan. And this, by the way, folks, this is going to build upon last week's episode of the weight of the workload. So building a plan. All right. Maybe that's just taking a few minutes, especially at the beginning of the week, to highlight everything that needs to be done and just build that plan as to how we're going to tackle it. And each day, even be diligent about coming back to that plan, what needs to be done. And furthermore, this is the kind of the second part here. Furthermore, we're going to also be building what we talked about last week is what's important versus what's urgent. Okay, we talked about that last week. And I'm going to probably keep hitting on this because I think it's it's important. Okay, this is truly important, is to be able to identify what is important versus what is currently urgent. And I think we can find ourselves that at the end of the day, it is truly important to get the crop planted and get everything sprayed and do everything that we need to do on the farm. But we got to ask ourselves in the current moment, is that the most important thing? Okay, well, maybe it is. Maybe it is, by all means, go do it. Or is that maybe in the current moment just the most urgent thing? Could you actually take just half an hour to focus on these other things that might, by the way, that might, by focusing on those other things, knocking those other things out of the park, that might be on your to do list that are probably more important in the current moment. Maybe it's paying the bills, maybe it's making the marketing decision, maybe it's looking back at your crop plan, your cost of production, all those things that might currently be more important. By doing those things, taking half an hour to do that before you get into the tractor, it might actually allow you more freedom in the tractor to focus on doing a better job planting the crop, to focus on enjoying that part of your day. Okay. Because I didn't even mention this. I did not even mention this, but going back to the stress of everything that bothers me and why this is kind of the second part here in this three-part series is when we're throughout the day and I've got all these things on my mind, all these business decisions, whether it be the marketing or going back to, we want to be profitable, and so is this going to be in line with our cost of production and all those things that rattles your brain because we didn't maybe necessarily take the time to focus on it, because we didn't necessarily take the time to kind of get those out of the way. Okay. So, what if we maybe instead take the time to focus on what's important versus what's truly urgent? And we can all admit that to some extent, a lot of times going to go spray, going to go plant, going to do this, that, or the other thing is usually just extremely urgent. Maybe not necessarily extremely important in that current moment, in the current moment. Okay. Now, that's a dividing line that's going to be hard to figure out for you. But that's one there that I think a guy can always come back to is asking ourselves what's important versus what's urgent. Okay. Now, third here is just thinking back to your goals. If we've been able to maybe set some goals on it the earlier of the year, maybe the short term, long term goals, think back to your goals and ask yourselves if what you're doing truly aligns with your goals. If your goal was for 2026 to be profitable and we do not focus our time and energy on that, and we focus solely on just getting the crop off the ground and being a farmer, not a farm business owner, all right, think back to your goals and are what we doing, are our actions truly aligning with those goals? And then fourth one here, set some goals. Set some short-term goals. Okay, what do I need to do just literally this week? Maybe my goal for this week is even if the weather's fit for us to do a lot of things outside, my goal is to make sure I get these bills paid. My goal is to make sure I pay attention to my cost of production at least once. My goal is to make sure that I'm looking at my cost of production before I make any other input decisions or plans. Maybe just the goal is to literally, every time you have to make a decision, rather than making a rushed, quick decision, you pause, you detach, and you make the decision. Maybe that's just a simple goal. You got to have something that's going to be able to kind of help ground you to some extent and take you back to your goals. And so those are kind of just the four different things that I think a guy can really do is start with a plan, ask yourself what's important versus what's urgent, think back to your goals that you set and are your actions aligning with those goals, and set new goals if you need to. Set new goals as to where you're at and even short-term goals that help you align with the long-term goals so that way we're ultimately going in the right direction. All right, bonus here, real quick. Hang with me now. This is important because as we were recording this, there's been some recent news. And so this is probably not necessarily new by the time you hear this, but it really goes in line with everything that we're talking about is focusing on the business side so this does not fall apart. The business doesn't fall apart as you're solely focusing on the fields. Is the government just announced, the USDA just announced the SDRP second payment, which is going to be coming out here now, guys. And so this is one of those payments that we don't want to necessarily miss. There's probably a lot of folks that you maybe qualified for the first payment. You applied for it, and so you got that a while back. Well, this is kind of the second round, and they actually upped this to a 75% of that indemnity level. And so there's going to be probably some additional payments here available for you to seek out from the government, from the USDA. And so we want to be mindful of this. This is a prime example of what we're just talking about. Okay. Now, they did extend, if you did not apply for your application already, they did extend that application window from April 30th, with this you're going to hear this after April 30th anyways, now to I think into August. So you do have more time. But by the way, we don't want to just take our time all the time in the world because we don't want this to be something that we just put off. All right, real dollars on the line that could be coming back to your pocket, your bank account, your family, if we're willing to do what it takes to make sure we're focusing on the business, not just focusing on the fields, not just focusing on the crops and the livestock, right? So this is part of being a business owner. If we want to stay in business, we got to focus on the business, okay? So I wanted to end with this kind of bonus here is this just because they kind of just came out with this here recently at the time of this recording. So this is a prime example of making sure that we are not letting these things fall through the cracks and even getting dropped completely. So that's really what I got for this week's episode. Next week, we're going to be kind of wrapping this up on this third part series here. We talked about the weight of the workload. We talked about not letting the business side of the farming operation fall apart. Now, next week on the third part here, we're going to be talking about how do we balance everything? How do we balance the work and the family and making sure that those things that are truly important to us, the family, by the way, they should always be very important to us, making sure that we do not put them completely on the back burner, making sure that that relationship there, that balance does not suffer too much. So, kind of want to make sure that we check in on that one because that's always a work in progress. So, going to go through a few things on that one. So, stay tuned. But for now, make sure that you're doing your due diligence to make sure that we do not let the business side of the farm business that we're running slide and fall apart. All right. That's all I got on this week's episode, folks. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for tagging along with me today as we sharpened our mindsets. If you've gained insight from today's episode, be sure to take a screenshot to share or send this episode to somebody who might also find value in it. For more, follow me on Instagram @GarrettRuskamp or on Facebook, and join me next time for more conviction through clarity.